Well, I'm really happy to speak with you today, Dan. We've talked before about the things you're doing with Love Loud and the Love Loud Festival. It's coming back for the first time in 2 years. It was gone for 2 years for, the obvious reasons. So for people who haven't seen the other interviews we've done, can you explain what Love Loud is and what the festival is and what its like mission is?
Yeah. Well, the mission of Love Loud in general is to ignite the conversation, to start the conversation in homes about what it means to truly love and celebrate our LGBTQ youth. And that may sound like a simple thing, but especially in deeply religious communities, we have really seen that acceptance is not what these kids need. They need to be celebrated, because in a lot of these homes, when kids are told, "Hey, I accept you," or a lot,
Tolerate.
yeah, or "I tolerate you," and sometimes it's not even that. It's no, this is sinful or far worse things. But accept has a dagger behind the back still for a lot of these kids, and so we're just talking about, hey, listen, these statistics show, if you love your child, if you want them to have a healthy life, if you want them to be truly happy, which the majority of these parents do, let's talk about celebrating them and telling them they're perfect, telling them there's nothing wrong with them, that God isn't looking down on them. That's the game changer, and especially in these religious communities.
So, I mean, obviously, I think I've talked to you before. Sorry if it's a weird question, but do you still consider yourself Mormon? Do you identify as Mormon culturally? If not, do you practice, because that's the world you grew up in. But I imagine there's a lot of division within the community about exactly what Love Loud purports to do.
Yeah, Mormonism is a lot like Judaism and a lot of other religions in that it's very cultural. So all my family, I have 7 brothers, 1 sister, tons of cousins. There's 40 plus grandkids. They're all Mormon. Every one of them practicing Mormons, in fact. I'm the only one who I would say is a non-practicing Mormon. I don't attend church. I'm not a highly religious person, but I'm very spiritually inclined. Spirituality is very important to me. I'm always searching for truth wherever it may lie, religious, non. So I'm pretty agnostic, I would say. But as far as Mormonism, I still claim Mormonism because it's my culture, right? It's my people. It's all my best friends growing up were Mormon, still are Mormon. So it's a tricky thing, and it sounds convoluted to anybody who's not from a very culturally, so some religions are like, you go once a year, it's not a big thing, like, but like Catholicism, Judaism, Mormonism, these it's very cultural, and it's part of your life. And I still, like, if my niece is getting baptized or something, like, I'm there, absolutely front row, like, I'm all for it. But I'm not raising my kids Mormon. I think there's a lot of
Mm.
things that I disagree with that I think is hurting our kids, and one of those things is this exact issue, which is anyone ever telling our youth that they are anything but perfect, and that loving who they love is wrong in some way, or that there's some God that's judging that, because there's no ounce of truth to that.
The last time I interviewed you was with your mom for the From Cradle to Stage series that you were part of. And, you were talking about how you're from such a large Mormon family. How does your family react to the fact that you're not raising your kids in that faith? Is that something that you guys even discuss or that they are upset about?
Yeah, I'm really, really close with my whole family. In fact, I'm moving on to a plot of land that's living with all my family in this community setting, kind of like farmland setting.
Wow.
So we're really close. It was difficult for many years. This has been a long transition for me, and it was difficult, when you have a mother who is very, very resolute about her faith, and she feels like she's saving her kid's life. That's and it goes back. The heritage is deep with my family. My ancestors were like the Pilgrims. They were the crossing the plains, the Mormons coming across, to Utah and founding Vegas. I'm from Vegas, not Utah, but Vegas is founded by Mormons and the mafia. so um,
That
so yeah,
it should say that on the sign as you
yeah.
enter on the highway,
welcome,
as you
welcome to
enter
the land.
Vegas.
Yeah, Mormons and mafia. It tells a lot about Vegas, that
Yeah.
kind of juxtaposition. But
Uh-huh.
anyway, so me and my mom, it's still a running dialogue. We still have conversations, sometimes heated, but there's always love in it. And I think she accepts it. I think that when my kids are alone with her, she's like, "Let me tell you about God and Jesus Christ." But So I've just accepted that's part of life, and I love for my kids to hear everything, and they can be religious if they want. I don't
Mhm.
believe in forcing anything upon your kids. I think that they should have the opportunity to hear everything and make their own decisions and make their own minds up.
Well, see, that also, but that brings it back to Love Loud. The interesting thing you said, a parent of resolute faith who really believes that they're saving their kids. A lot of Mormon parents who are upset or disapproving or not accepting of the fact that they have a child that's queer could be because they actually believe they're trying to save their kids from a horrible, fate of hell or whatever. I don't know. I'm sorry if I'm sounding naive. I don't
No,
totally,
no, you're
but
totally right.
that's something you have to convince the parents that even if they think they're doing right by their kids, saving their kids, they're doing exactly the opposite. That how do you do that?
Yeah, and you hit it exactly on the head, which is at the end of the day, most of these parents, the majority of them, think that they're telling their kid something that's going to help them when they say,
Mhm.
"Hey, listen, God isn't okay with this." But it's incorrect, obviously, and what we try to sit down and have conversation about, which, Love Loud is all about, hey, let's all sit down at the table. It's not you're right, you're wrong. It's let's sit down and let's just look at the statistics. And the statistics say your child is 7 times more likely to take their life when not accepted, celebrated in their home or community. So when these parents really understand that and what that means, it doesn't mean, hey, again, it doesn't mean, yes, but let's go to church and let's try to like go to therapy or these things that are just absolutely killing our children. It means they are treated the exact same as your other children. They are told the same principles of God loving them. If that's what they choose to do, if they're in a religious household, God loves them and they're going to heaven. Like if that's your story that you're telling, you better tell all your kids that, your queer kids that, because if you're not, then your kid is 7 times more likely to take their life. And no parent wants that. So if they really understand that statistic, we're finding most of these parents are saying, when they really hear these things and they know it's not like made up things, no parent wants their kid to take their life. I
Mm.
hope so. I hope not. Most of these parents, at least. So
Yeah.
we just try to educate, and there's no, it's just by the books. It's numbers. It's come sit at the table and let's just look at the numbers.
In addition to educating and suicide prevention, obviously, is deprogramming these gay conversion therapy things. Is that something that you're trying to take on head on?
100%. Absolutely no question. Conversion therapy is so destructive. It's still practiced all over the world, for the record, which most people are surprised by. They're like, what? Oh, is this still happening? Yes, this is still happening. And if we know statistically, there's no question about it. Doesn't work because there's no foundation on it. These kids aren't choosing this thing. You can't fix it out of them. They're born this way. And if you try to change their inherent desire to love, what do you think that's going to do? Well, we're all living to love. It's the basis of life. Or whoever they might be. If you're trying to change that, you are going to hurt that kid. So it's no question that's, we got to do away with it worldwide. And we start with the US and you move out.
Do you feel this is a realistic goal? I recently interviewed David Archuleta from American Idol. I'm sure you're familiar with him.
Yeah, we're friends.
Okay, awesome. And obviously he recently came out, and he, unlike say Tyler Glenn from Neon Trees, who is playing this festival, but it's my impression is Tyler Glenn completely left the church. He actually had a solo album called Excommunication. It's pretty literal about what he's been through. So he basically felt that if he was going to live out, he couldn't be part of this world. David Archuleta seems to very much still want to be part of it, like, very actively part of it. He really strongly identifies with as a Mormon, with Mormon culture. He does not want to leave. Is that honestly realistic? Because there's another group you may have heard of that I've talked to, a girl group, a twin sister act called Mother Mary. They were raised Mormon. They're not queer, but they were raised Mormon, and they've completely left the church, moved to New York. And I asked him, I actually was talking about you, and I was asking, do you think like um that it's realistic that one could still identify as Mormon but live this way? And they said no. They just basically said burn it down to the ground, like you start over. And then there's someone like Archuleta who very much wants to like have a foothold in both worlds. Is there a middle ground? Like, what's the ideal the dream that you would have?
I think that it's a very, very personal decision. And I know that sounds like such a vanilla answer, but I really think that's the safe answer. Everyone is individualized. Some of these kids have their whole community, their family, that is Mormon or Muslim or whatever their faith is, and that's their foundation. So when
Yeah.
you just tell a child, "Hey, it's a simple answer. Leave that all. Get out of there." You actually might be putting that child in a higher danger situation
Mm,
because you're taking away all their foundation. So as far as, anyone goes, I don't ever want to speak for them. One, I'm a heterosexual man, so I don't live their truth. Um, and so I think David knows what's best for David. That being said, I talk with David on the phone just
that's
recently
awesome.
about this specific thing. He's a dear friend. He's been a friend for years. He's been over to our house, been around our children. I love David. I have no doubt that David's on the journey he's supposed to be on, and David's going to do exactly what David needs to do. And he's all heart and true, and he's one of my favorite humans ever.
Yeah.
Like his song "Glorious," we play that at my house for my kids all the time. I swear that's like one of my all-time favorite songs, and I love David with all my heart. So, his journey is his, and he'll do what he needs to do, and he'll do what's right for him, and whenever
Right.
that is, and whatever that means,
Oh
that's
no,
up
I,
to him.
I I guess what I meant was, of course, that's what he wants, but is it realistic that
Right.
anyone who identifies as LGBTQ plus and also identifies just as strongly as Mormon, that they can have not just the acceptance, but as you put it out, the celebration. Like, obviously, this is, I assume, the goal of Love Loud, but I think it's going to take some time, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the way that these any child that's living in a deeply religious home that's telling them that they're fundamentally broken, I think that there's no question that's going to be dangerous, harmful for them. That's what Love Loud's all about. That's why our mission is to get into these homes, to open these doors, to bring these people out that would typically be very guarded towards anyone who feels like some way far left, throwing a stone. Like, we don't make forward movement with that when people just throw stones at each other. We make forward movement when people come sit at the table and there's respect and understanding, and then we talk. And so, yeah, I think that goes without saying that, of course, any home that is saying, you're flawed and God thinks you're flawed is going to hurt the kid. But that kid's transition out of faith or staying in faith is not for me to
Right.
step on. I just think it's not my place to say when that time is. And I don't know if anybody should push David out or say, David, you should be doing this.
Right.
David's going to figure that out. There's resources available to these people, and they're on their journey.
Well, as you mentioned, it was kind of funny. You said, you're a heterosexual man. I guess you're in a great position of privilege. You're heterosexual, you're white, you're male, you're in a huge rock band, you're wealthy. You don't have to do this. And there's lots of people in your position, not mentioning names, of course, but who don't do things like this. What made you feel like you had to do this and be so proactive about it? It's not like you're just lending your name to something. Like, you're in it. You're in the trenches.
Yeah.
What made you want to do this?
Family and friends. That's the simple answer. Since when I was very young, I was involved in the art community deeply, and it's no secret when you're in the art community that most of the best artists are queer. So many of my dearest friends from young age were whether they were out or not, a lot of them were Mormon and not out. I watched that struggle as a teenager. um, I remember being in ninth grade, and there was a kid that I knew. He was Mormon, so the Mormons know Mormons, but I wasn't particularly close to him. But he went in front of the Mormon temple in Las Vegas, and he was. Everyone knew he was queer, but he wasn't out per se. But he was bullied for it. This is like worse than it is now, even, because everybody knows the '90s were like a terrible time. When you're in high school, like, bullying was just. I mean, not to say there's not bullying still, but it was pretty bad. Like, people would, it was bad. Anyway, he went in front of Mormon temple in his car. He drove to in front and shot himself, killed himself.
Oh no.
Um, so this is, watching this happen. And then I went on a Mormon mission, and there were missionaries that were queer, and then they'd get sent home, and it's being sent home that your whole community knows that. And then you're seen as this kind of black sheep that's like, you couldn't hack a mission. Why couldn't he hack a mission? Well, he couldn't hack a mission because he was queer. And it's this like toxic shaming process that happens to these kids. And so I grew up seeing it my whole life. So with my friends, and I have family that's also queer. And so, yeah, I just think it's a piece of the puzzle. You have to have everybody on all sides come to the table in order to make change. So, yeah, I just think I'm one small piece of the puzzle that, is on the puzzle board.
When you were witnessing these things you just mentioned about, particularly that suicide, that what a horrible story. Was that a big part of your slow kind of questioning of
Yeah,
the religion, how you've been raised?
I think my first real questioning was in 6th grade. I had a friend who everybody made fun of because they all would say behind his back that he was queer. And I watched his struggle, and I watched how much it hurt him, and how much it ended up making him depressed and on his own. And it was the first time that I was like, man, I'm being taught something like everything prior I felt was like, God is loving, God loves all, but then it's like, but not that. And it just didn't make sense for me. Even in my small juvenile kid brain, I was like, but God was like, but do what I say to love. Like it didn't add up. And then I just rinse and repeat, saw that over and over with different people, different situations. And, even when I met my wife and we got married, when I met her, she was living with her 2 best friends who were queer, and they were best friends. And just because she was marrying a Mormon, they didn't come to our wedding, which I understand. At the time, I remember being really hurt by it. But reflecting now, I understand. At that time was at Prop 8, which anybody knows about Prop 8 and the Mormons. That was a time when Mormons were standing against equal marriage and allowing LGBTQ marriage. So we were seen as the enemy. So that's when I felt like, okay, I can't even stay as a Mormon, because even if I'm speaking out about these things, simply by being Mormon and standing silently, I was an enemy to all that were striving for equality. So that hurt has taken a long time to repair. I don't know that it will ever repair fully with my wife and her best friends. And that kills me, man. It kills me. But yeah, just stuff like that.
How does, to your knowledge, how does in general the LGBTQ plus community look at what you're doing? Because I just remember a Facebook thing I saw, like a friend of mine posted something, a friend of mine who worked at a gay organization posted something, an article about you and about LOVELOUD, and said, isn't this great? And there were some people in the comments that were agreeing, but there were some other people that were like, no, this is, and I'm sorry, this is not me saying it, was someone in the comments, but saying like, no, this is BS. Like, if you want to, change things, you got to break away from the church. It can't be changed from within, and, there was a healthy debate going on, but, what has been your experience that you've noticed?
I mean, one, I love hearing that. Honestly, I love hearing that, because that's what Love Loud is about, is igniting those conversations. So,
Okay.
you know what I mean? It's like,
I'm glad you're not
there's a
offended.
conversation. No,
Okay.
my skin has grown over these years, but
Okay.
I think that that's what Love Loud is about. And that being said, um, I think that at the end of the day, as long as people are having this conversation, and Love Loud is doing something to create that conversation, I don't care what it is. I think that's serving the purpose. What is killing our youth is not talking about this. Is people just being in stagnant water, and religion saying, let's step back from this. Religions don't, for the record, Mormonism, Catholicism, Judaism, these religions don't want us having this conversation, because it puts them in this position that they feel like they cannot make a right choice.
How are things going? Obviously you're such an open book and you were all about having conversations. I know that during the pandemic on social media, you were being really open about how you had decided to get sober, and you were doing like kind of daily updates about it. How has that been going, especially once you're back on the road?
I appreciate you checking in on that. I am sober, and I think the road actually helps, because I don't really have a choice. It's kind of one of it's like if you're not sober, you're not gonna be able to sing. At least I can't. I don't know. Like when you hear about the whole like archaic thing of like the rock star that's like going crazy and drinking, singing, and doing drugs and all those things. Like I don't know how you would put on a good show, or at least have a a rigorous schedule and have people that are counting on you. It's too much pressure, so it keeps me keeps me pretty sober. It keeps me fully sober, and I feel like everybody's on their own. I'm not like Mr. Sober guy. Everybody needs to be sober, yada yada. But it helps me to have people to check in with, and the our community, our fan base has been really helpful for that. And being on the road, it's actually really helpful.
Do you mind me asking what made you A, decide to get sober when you did, and also B, so like kind of journalistic, like diary style on Twitter and
Yeah.
Instagram about it?
The reasoning is really for my kids, I'd say, more than anything. I'm a dad of 4 kids, and um, I just want to be a good dad, you know. But as far as documenting it on Twitter, I think that by just putting the statement, I needed help at that time. I needed, to feel like I had a check-in or something like
Mm,
that. I'm a really, I'm a very isolated person. I can isolate pretty bad. I'm really an introvert by nature, and on stage, it's like I
mhm,
am. That's my place. Like that is where I exist. It always has been since I was a kid when I first stepped on a stage, and whether it was like performing in a play or, I feel like an extrovert there. I feel free to be that. But yeah, when I'm off the stage, I isolate quite a bit. So it felt like a good check-in for me, and it actually helped me quite a bit to know, like, hey, in the comments people will be like, hey, I'm sober 3 days, or hey, my dad just passed away from this, or
mhm.
it just gave me a little extra that's why I feel like social media is not all bad, right?
It's not all bad.
There's some good things to it. I'm less and less social media guy these days, but I think there are some good causes for it.
You were talking about isolation and your tendency naturally, even in non-pandemic times, I assume, to isolate. We were all isolated in the last couple of years. I mean, hope I'm not being too invasive, but I was not aware you ever had an issue with alcohol or drugs. Did you have like a relapse thing, or was it this a pandemic mental health thing, or like what was going on? It was very shortly after I think I last spoke with you that you at least started tweeting about
Yeah,
this.
I mean, I think well, first of all, I really hate the narrative of rock and roll, and like there's this kind of glorification of drugs, and
Mm-hmm.
I really don't identify with that. I've had multiple friends that have died because of drug overdoses, close friends, starting in high school. Um, and so I don't see it as cool at all. There's nothing cool. Anybody who has someone close to them who is, dealing with real addiction, it's not a pretty thing to see. And I'm not saying it's shameful. Like absolutely, if you're like, that's why I talk about it. That's why I ended up having to talk about it. But I've dealt with things for many years before that, but I just kept it to myself. And for that reason, being like, I didn't want to be the typical um, person who's talking, I wasn't at a place of maturity of mind to be able to talk about it in a way that made sense, I think. So when I felt like, okay, this could help me and hopefully help others, not in a anything cool about this, only and yeah, I don't know, the cringiest thing to me personally is like seeing it used as like something that's associated with rock in a way that's cool or something, which I grew up seeing a lot of the bands that I liked. I felt like that kind of was a thing. And that's part of the way that I got involved in the first place, is thinking, well, this person does it and they're cool, and look at
Mm.
them living this extreme life, and maybe I should try that.
Sex, drugs, and rock and roll. I mean, it's a saying. It's a cliche.
Yeah, if the drugs was taken out of that, then I'm cool. Then cool,
do
cool
you
man.
mind do you mind me asking if there was any kind of epiphany or moment that made you, with getting sober in the last, was how long has it been, a year about now, or
Yeah.
yeah, well, congratulations again. But what was there, was it just like, was there a particular catalyst for this?
I think you just, you see your life kind of crumbling around you. That's I think the definition of addiction kind of is when you're keeping it from people that you love, right?
Mm.
Um, so yeah, I think it was just kind of came to a head for me.
It was right around the time last time I spoke with you, we were talking about, you and your wife getting back together. So it seems like it was all part of kind of like a great new chapter in your life.
Yeah, I think it's been a tumultuous, last 5 years or something for me, but it's also been a really learning, like very powerful learning time for me. Like a lot of growing up, a lot of coming to terms with things, and I have a ton of learning yet to do. But I feel like it's been, through your deep valleys, you really cherish the sunlight, you cherish kind of the meadows, and I feel like that's I've like yeah I have a different perspective from these last 5 years. A lot of it's due to I've lost 5 people that I was really close with, all to death
Oh,
within the last 3 years.
I'm sorry.
Um, I feel like a lot of people have, right? I mean, it's like,
Yeah.
it feels like it's just kind of, as you get older, especially, it's like, yeah.
Tying it back into Love Loud, but also what we were just talking about. Obviously, I imagine in among LGBTQ youth who are living, in not ideal situations in the Mormon community, ostracized by their family, kicked out, like there must be a prevalence of addiction in that world. Like, is that something Love Loud is also helping with? Because I imagine a lot of kids might turn to self-medicating when they're going through something so painful.
Yeah, well, in fact, to finish off that statistic I was telling you earlier, if you go further down the statistic, they're 7 times more likely to take their life when not accepted in their home and community, and also 7 times more likely for risky drug use and risky sex. So certainly, when a child is, kicked out of the home, or not accepted in their home, they turn to other means that are destructive. Um, so yeah, it's definitely a multifaceted, multi-destructive issue, and it's a simple answer, actually, which is the crazy thing. Which is the simple answer is just treat our youth the same, like afford them the same respect and love. And if you need to learn pronouns, like learn the pronouns. Like it's so silly to me that these things are seen as like the whole world has learned all these nuanced things for years, and suddenly like one nuance that's going to serve and save lives, like it's the same thing. I don't know, it's one of those things that it's hard to have patience with. But I yeah, we got to change our ways, because we're just continually seeing our youth take their lives, because we can't make simple changes.
Well, I really appreciate you and Love Lab being a big part of the change. Once again, every time I speak with you, I thank you for everything you do. I guess I'll wrap this up by saying if there are parents in the Mormon community who are considering taking their queer or questioning child to Love Loud, and they're maybe on the fence about it or like weirded out by it, not sure if this is something they want to be involved in, what would be your advice to those parents?
First and foremost, I'd say we really pride ourselves on Love Loud being a family-friendly place. Um, we haven't always been perfect about it. We've had some learning over the few years of trying to find that balance of like celebrating our youth and also not being like ultra super conservative where it's boring, but like also a fun time, but like being safe to bring your kids and people from conservative households coming and knowing, hey, this is going to be family friendly. If we're not family friendly, then we're not doing we're not doing it right. So especially this year, and as we learn, what we need to do, we really focus on that. We talk to the artists about hey, there's going to be small kids in the audience. This is, there's a lot of prep that goes into this, and a lot of learning that you can only learn through trial and error with something like this. Putting on a LGBTQ festival in the heartland of Mormonism in Utah is is a very nuanced, tricky thing. I feel like we've really gotten to a great place. So to those parents, I'd say it's going to be safe for you and your kids to come. Please come. It will only bring your family closer together. I can't tell you how many letters we receive from kids who come out to their parents at Love Loud, come out to their uncle who they've been afraid of, for years at Love Loud, or just families that heal through difficult things they've had in the past. It's a wonderful experience, great music, great bands. And so I really hope you come out. It's May 14th in the Vivint Arena. And sorry, January, February, March, April, May. Yeah, May 14th.
May
Just want to make
14th.
sure I got that right. And the lineup's great. We got Willow, Anita, Neon Trees, Matt and Savannah, the Aces. I'm going to be performing. And there's also other acts that haven't been announced yet that are going to be there, as well as many awesome speakers. So it's a fantastic event, and hope to see you there.
I hope to be there. I hope to speak with you again soon. It's always lovely to chat with you. Congratulations. Everything is going so well for you, Dan.
Thank you, Lyndsey. Always a pleasure. Thanks for having me.